Thank you all again for joining. I think people are still trickling in, but it's a couple minutes past the hour, so we should get started. My name is Raphael Breit. Thank you all for joining us today at the Regulatory Assistance Project as we kick off this lovely discussion on different models for heat pump workforce training and development. We are going to just start off with some brief housekeeping notes. You all should have heard the notification when you joined, but just for the record, this meeting is being recorded. That recording will be made available in a couple of days. And also, due to the large number of attendees, everybody will be kept muted throughout the webinar. If you have questions, you're welcome to submit them for the Q&A section. Please do so through the Q&A tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen there. And we just want to mention we are officially scheduled for 1 hour today from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. But if there are additional questions, we will be able to stay on for some extra time up to an additional half an hour. So please feel free to submit questions at any point during the webinar, again, through the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And with that, if we could just go into the agenda, please. Thank you, Donna. So today we're going to hear from 3 different people, different organizations that are taking unique, or say different strategies to approach the challenge of workforce training and development. They are Paul Chaves with Mitsubishi. He is their national training manager. We've got Audrey Knox, workforce training manager at ICAST, and Bridget Gifford, a program manager at Efficiency Maine. We're going to have kind of more of an open discussion format for this webinar, starting off with individual questions for each panelist and then more general roundtable questions after that. We will hopefully get to the Q&A section around 2:45 p.m., have about 15 minutes for that. Although, like I mentioned, we do have additional time set aside for those of you if we have more questions than we can answer in those 15 minutes. We can take the time to do that. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Andrew Valainis, to kick off the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Rafi, and thank you everybody for joining us today, and to our panelists for joining us as well. As Rafi said, my name is Andrew Valainis. I'm an associate here on the US team with RAP, along with Rafi, and we're going to be walking you through this webinar today. I'm really excited about our discussion, and to begin with, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of our panelists to please introduce yourself and describe your organization and your connection to workforce development. So Paul, we're going to start with you. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Andrew. I'm Paul Chaves. I'm the training manager for Mitsubishi Electric Trane, HVAC. We manufacture and sell heat pumps. Our market here is the United States and the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands and some of South America, right? And I run the training department, and we consist of 10 training centers in the United States, 1 in Mexico that Mitsubishi owns and operates. And we also oversee another 95 training centers that are operated and owned by our distributor partners throughout the country.
Great. Thank you, Paul, and thanks again for joining us today. Audrey, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thanks, Andrew. My name is Audrey Knox. I'm workforce training manager with ICAST. ICAST is a nonprofit that focuses on delivering energy efficiency solutions in the multifamily affordable housing market. And in particular, we focus on the triple bottom line. So projects that have an economic impact, saving money, environmental impact, helping the environment, and a social impact, which is improving quality of life and access to opportunity, which is really where the workforce component comes in. And I lead the implementation of Benefit, which is a DOE-sponsored grant that is focused on training the next generation of heat pump technicians. And we provide, through the program, we're able to provide free online training, certification in building science principles for introductory level participants, as well as EPA 608, which is required for all HVAC. And we also provide connection to employer partners who are looking to hire on folks and can help facilitate hands-on training to supplement our online curriculum.
Great, thank you, Audrey. And before I let you go back on mute, can you remind us what ICAST stands for?
Yeah, so it stands for International Center for Appropriate and Sustainable Technology.
Perfect, thank you. Great, and Bridget, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me. My name's Bridget Gifford. I work with Efficiency Maine, and Efficiency Maine rebates all of the energy efficiency upgrades throughout the state of Maine. So typically in all states, there is some sort of efficiency program, and it's housed within the utilities. In Maine, it's part of state government, and there's a handful of states out there that run their efficiency programs this way. But really what we do all day long is just cut rebates checks to those homeowners or facility managers that are undertaking an efficiency project. And so those contractors within the state of Maine that are partnered with Efficiency Maine are the ones that are doing the real work every day with that energy saving. So that's why I'm here today, to support those contractors.
Great, thank you, Bridget. And again, just thank you all three of you for joining us today. We're really excited to dive into the conversation. And so now, like we said, to better understand kind of each of the different models that you are all working on, I'm going to ask a couple more targeted questions to each of you that are kind of specific to your program. So Paul, we're going to cycle back to you to start us off. Paul, one issue that you've talked to us about is consistency or lack thereof among state requirements, certifications, and regulations. Can you talk to us a little bit about how this is a barrier for workforce development and kind of how you've seen that develop over the years?
Yeah, every state in the union has different licensing requirements. Some states have no license requirements whatsoever. And it's the hoops that you have to jump through to get licenses. I'm based in Massachusetts. That's where I worked as a contractor. And in Massachusetts, there's a refrigeration license, a sheet metal license. There could be a gas fitter license. There could be a low voltage license for different things. And another state may not have any of that. One of the hurdles that we face here in this state is I can only be on track for one of those licenses at any given time. Right? In reality, as a contractor working, in the van and in the trade, I could be doing sheet metal one day, I could be doing refrigeration the next day, but I can only be pursuing one of those licenses at a time. And every state's a little bit different. And it even gets down to the building codes. We have a national building code, but each state has to adopt it. And then they have their amendments that they add. So there really isn't a consistency. In my license that I might have in Massachusetts, if I decide to pack up and move to another state, I have to start all over again. So it's an inconsistency, and it starts with the codes and it continues into the licensing requirements. And Audrey mentioned the EPA. That's one of the few consistencies that we actually have. It's a federal certification that anybody who's going to touch refrigerant or handle refrigerant must have. Everything else is different state by state.
Yeah, which, like you said, obviously presents a challenge as the workforce is probably more mobile these days than it used to be too. I know just generally people are a little more mobile these days than they used to be as well.
Yeah. Our friends north of us in Canada have it right. They have a refrigeration license, and once they get it, they can go anywhere in the country with it. And several of their licenses are like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of speaking of timelines and things changing over the years, given your experience, and I believe you've shared you've been in this industry quite a while, what elements of kind of industry training and technology have you seen evolve the most over the years, and how is that impacting kind of how the workforce operates and how we might consider their development?
Yeah, when I used to be in the classroom, I used to give this example. One of the first service calls I went on as a technician was for a split system air conditioning piece of equipment in a home that at the time was probably 30 years old, and it wasn't running. And compared to what the equipment is today, that was really simple. There was a couple of motors, a couple of switches, a couple of fans. And as a technician, I would have been expected to know how to fix that or condemn it or order a part or what have you. We can't say that today. Now we have our systems are basically computers. They're high efficiency. The motors, the technology of the motors have changed. They're super high efficiency motors, high efficiency equipment. It's as a young technician, I remember the first time I opened up a panel and I saw printed circuit boards, and that was totally new. So it's similar to the automotive industry. When I was a kid, my brother was pretty mechanical without any training. He could go work on his 54 Ford in the driveway at any time. But now if he wanted to do that, there's all kinds of computerized things that he needs and special software. So it's really been a dramatic change. And it requires us to all keep training, continuing training, which is what we basically do, is continuing education for the existing contractors.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how that improvements in technology, right, to use that word. I mean, the technology's gotten better, more capabilities, but obviously more complex too. And something else you've touched on in conversations we've had is kind of this concept of what I'll sort of called reactive training versus proactive training, right? So like you said, you open up the unit that's not working, there's a computer in there, you sort of maybe have to look up what to do as opposed to being trained ahead of time on everything. And that seems to be impacting kind of how the workforce is just developing and how we manage trainings as well.
Right. There's a certain what's the word I'm looking for? There's certain people out there that don't want training until they need it. And when they need it, they want it on demand. Right. It's certainly a cultural shift from what I'm used to. I was used to going to training, going to a class, finding out about the equipment and learning them. So when I go to find that piece of equipment and work on it, it won't be foreign to me. But we've gotten some feedback from, I'm going to say it, the younger generation. That's like they got their computer right there, their smartphone. They want the training when they need it. They want to look things up. And we do that. We offer in-person training. We offer on-demand e-learning. And we do have most of our paperwork available to anybody. They can go and look things up. So we're about giving people a fishing pole rather than a fish.
I like that, Paul. Thanks so much. As someone who's based in Montana, I appreciate the fishing analogy. And as someone who's part of the younger generation, I don't take any offense, by the way, either. Okay, great. So thank you, Paul, for that. I do want to move on to our next speaker, but obviously we'll be cycling back to hear more from Paul in a little bit. So we're going to move to Audrey. Audrey, your model is unique in that it's applicable and available across the US, this kind of curriculum development. Given that wide scope, how have you been able to leverage partnerships to kind of make this work, right? I mean, it's a broad scope. How are you addressing that part of it?
So partnerships are key. And I think that, meeting our participants, our partners where they are. So identifying, for example, cities that have energy goals and heat pump install goals, and, connecting with them on how we can support that directly with our trainees, trying out models in a local setting. For example, I'm working with, there's a workforce center in Berkeley, California, which obviously has very ambitious heat pump installation goals. They have an HVAC pre-apprentice program. So we can connect those students. They can become trainees of ours with the online curriculum. One of our benefit graduates started his own HVAC company in Berkeley. He wants to hire local youth and get them in the industry. So we can guide them directly from our online training into hands-on training and ideally job placement with that contractor. So that's a model that we're demoing in a local market, but that is a scalable model that we can glean best practices from and can be applied, in different regions. I think, again, just the partnerships, just it's going to look a little bit different. Being able to provide customized training pathways and meeting trainees where they are is crucial. And I think that's where our program really is unique and kind of stands apart, is that we can help, anybody can sign up for trainings, but we can help individuals really understand what trainings, which particular courses they need, which pathway they should be on, other resources that they can connect to, and also wraparound services. ICAST doesn't provide them directly, but we help facilitate connections with those providers, because we hear the bottom line from contractors, I want a warm body who's going to show up on time. So how do we help facilitate that?
Yeah, and that's such a crucial need. I've heard that in other conversations about workforce development too, particularly trainings. If Paul and yourself, you've talked about on-demand trainings and meeting people where they are. For any kind of in-person training that's a few days, a week long, right? People may have to take time off from a second job they may have, or worry about childcare or things like that. So those partnerships seem really important as well in terms of just helping access training to begin with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say that that's, definitely a challenge in terms of accessibility. I think, as we're talking about how our curriculum is available, it's online. We're exploring ways for it to be mobile optimized, because, this is the upcoming generations, the TikTok generation, right? They want things that they can get through in a couple of minutes. And there's ways that you can customize your training to fit that. And I think, not limiting our delivery methods and continually expanding how we can disseminate the curriculum and the training to folks and provide them with opportunities for supplemental resources and hands-on training is really important.
Yeah, and you touched on something interesting there too, and I know you've used the phrase "meeting the workforce" where it is a couple times now, which I love. And you've shared with us in other conversations we've had about your background in education. Can you talk a little bit about kind of outreach and recruitment efforts at the local level? You kind of mentioned, right, the TikTok generation, having things be on your mobile phone now versus a computer. Can you tell us kind of your approach to that?
Yeah. So again, going back to the customization, working with these organizations that already have workforce development initiatives and finding out how we can plug heat pumps into that. There's a lot of different angles you can leverage with the younger generation. They actually do care about having an impact on the environment. So I think that's definitely a primary focus for a lot of them. They all want to feel like they're making the world a better place. And so I think as much as you can engage them around your job choices, will be can directly impact that future. And so I think presenting at local events and having an online presence. We've started to create a little series of HVAC hero videos that, again, is kind of our answer to TikTok, and how you can just get younger folks even thinking about what is this whole world of HVAC. And it's a very rapidly growing field and industry, and that they really are embarking on a career pathway that it's not just about, heat pumps are an important new technology now, but in 5 years there's going to be another, and in 10 years there's going to be another. So really creating an ethic of continued learning and in these emerging technologies, so that they're, again, not being reactive, but being proactive in that I'm learning this new technology now, but I want to be prepared for the one that comes down the line in 10 years or 15 years. And that I want to get involved, now, so that I'm at the forefront when those opportunities arise.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Audrey. And that actually kind of leads into one of the questions we have for Bridget, actually. So Bridget, we're going to come to you now. And your organization works a lot on workforce, not just training, but support and coaching. So thinking of, okay, now we're in the workforce and looking at other things coming down the line. So not just the training for the newer folks. What does this look like for your organization, and how has this helped organizations and businesses in Maine kind of connect to each other and grow their businesses?
So really my job all day long is to drive demand. And so if I'm effective, I am helping those contractors' phones ring off the hook. So the way we do that is, setting our rebates well. So customers are compelled to undergo, to take on that project at home or at work. And the other thing we do is market that rebate and that technology. So heat pumps, for example, heat pump water heaters are super popular in Maine. And just really talking about the benefits all the time so that customers really understand what the benefits are. They're going to save money, they're going to save energy, they're going to be comfortable. This widget is going to give them heat and AC, all of these great things. And so, we're advertising on Google and we're advertising print and radio. So the more we can drive demand to those partnered contractors, hopefully, the more their business grows and the more confident they are to hire on. And set their prices in a way that's going to be a sustainable business for them. And so what we do is whenever we're marketing, we've got our website listed, and on our website, we've got a database of all of those partnered contractors. And the way that a customer can find someone in their area is to select their specialty that they're looking for, maybe a heat pump installation, and then their zip code, and you'll see everyone in your area who's doing that work around you. And our database will sort of populate by those contractors who've done the most rebates for Efficiency Maine. So those top installers are listed first. So those connections and that partnership just grows stronger. And, so they're at the top of the list, potentially getting a lot of phone calls and hiring on. And so, yeah, we are trying to drive demand ultimately to get the work done and support those partnered contractors who are doing most of the work of the energy savings and making sure that they feel well supported. And so, yeah, whatever we can do to support those contractors, we've got, scholarships for their new employees to get their credentials. We've got all sorts of time to just connect with them one-on-one, do ride-alongs, and whatever they might need. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this, Efficiency Maine, we're just writing rebate checks all day, but those contractors are doing the real work of the energy savings. So it's our job to drive demand and support what they're doing.
And one thing you touched on, I love this real focus on driving demand. You've talked a lot about kind of connecting the workforce and marketing and helping businesses and supporting them. There's an educational component, a public education component to it as well, right? Not just marketing in the sense of, hey, here's what a heat pump is, but here's how it works and how it's beneficial. Is that right?
Yeah, we tried a lot of things in the beginning and ultimately found that, the average homeowner wasn't super curious about the technology itself, just that it was heat, it was AC, it was all in the same box, it was going to save them money. So we try to just stay on those sound bites that are really going to be motivating to a homeowner. There are some that, we'll geek out on and get into the weeds of the technology itself. But in general, we've done different like case studies and looked into what messaging really matters most, what drives that demand and moves the needle. And Google's a great tool for that. You can sort of practice and what's getting the clicks and what's really resonating. So if we're effective, then we're using all those tools and we're paying attention to the ones that work and then pushing those. Yeah.
And one final question for you, Bridget. I'm interested, especially kind of given your role and maybe you have a perspective on this. Obviously to an extent, these contractors are competitors with each other, but you're bringing them together and they're communicating in ways. Is there a general sense of kind of an all boats float kind of approach, or do they see the value in those interconnections? Obviously, even though they're still competing for business at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting and it varies. We've seen sort of like maybe an insulation contractor team with a heat pump contractor. They are competitors. We have a newsletter that, we deliver monthly, just sort of best practices, what we're seeing in the field, and share metrics data, like these are how many rebates that were, this month of this fiscal year as opposed to this month last fiscal year, and how sort of the market's doing in relation to the past. And so that's been helpful. And just some friendly competition is also kind of nice. We always list in our newsletter those top 3 installers, just so they can get a little accolade, but also that number 4 guy, right, wants to get in the top 3 and get printed. So positive peer pressure is our intent with that. But yeah, it's our role to sort of, like share those best practices, what we're seeing, because they're just doing their own work. And so that's important. And then also try to, coach and see the forest for the trees kind of thing, and what's going on in the marketplace in general.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much to Bridget and Audrey and Paul for sharing about each of your specific programs. Now we're going to do a little bit of more of a roundtable. I'm going to ask some broader questions, and I'm going to welcome each of you to respond to, and kind of from your perspective. So the first one I'd like to ask is, what is the biggest challenge that your organization specifically is facing or seeing around workforce training and development? So Audrey, we're going to actually start with you.
Sure. So I would say, accessibility is always an issue. And again, why we connect folks with wraparound service providers to make sure that they can get on a computer. Also, I would say taking into consideration seasonality. So, if folks are already in jobs and they're upskilling, they're probably not going to want to do training during this busy summer season. So, just making sure our calendars align. Also, the assumption, I think, and I noticed in the Q&A, there was a question about cost. And I think I forgot to mention that our program is no cost, it's free. And so there is sometimes an assumption, I think, when you're offering a free program, that people are going to jump at that chance, but it's still time. And so for us, it's, how do we ensure that people have the time to complete the coursework? It is self-paced, so there's no set class times that folks have to sign into, but when they're upskilling and they're already working 40 plus hours a week, how do we help incentivize them to take on an additional time commitment like this? And so working with employer partners to help get those existing workers engaged. We work with employer partners to upskill their entire teams, and we can work with them to sort of map out what a timeline and schedule could look like. And so that can help remove that barrier. And I think also just being upfront at the beginning as to, what are your goals for this? Is this something that, you want to get this done in a certain amount of time, or are you just kind of signing up and, you'll finish it over the next several months? And, making sure that we're all kind of on the same page with those expectations and how we can support their objectives.
Yeah, thank you for that, Audrey. And Paul, what about you? For your organization, what are you seeing as one of the biggest challenges right now?
There's just a few. It's going to be hard to choose just one. We actually have a high demand for classes right now, so much so that we have a waiting list of people actually waiting to get in classes. We have more people that want training than we can fit into training. And I'm talking about the instructor-led training at our training centers. One of the biggest things that popped into my head when you asked that question is, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is just an understanding of basics, the basic principles, installation principles that we're seeing. It got so much so that we've been for years in the business of training the contractor who's already working as a contractor, typically with 3 to 5 years of experience. And we kind of had to add in on, I think it was Audrey that brought up a point of different attacking training from different angles. And we've actually had to put on some basic classes that we just piloted. And we're ready for the IRA with the passing of that legislation. We're geared up and ready to start training. We have actually put together an e-learning video to install a one-to-one heat pump. That's also designed for instructor-led and for a webinar. And getting back to my opening comments about the inconsistencies, we're waiting to find out from each state who's adopting that, what they're going to require for training. So it's just that, those are all the challenges that we're facing right now. There's a lot of them, but those are the biggest ones, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's maybe sometimes hard to prioritize when there's so many, of course. And Bridget, from your perspective, what are you seeing as one of the biggest challenges for you right now?
Well, one of the challenges that I hear from our contractors is that it is challenging when Efficiency Maine changes those rebate amounts. So, it's our job to invest budgets throughout the year, and whether those things are going quickly and or the pace is going too slowly, the rebate amounts could change. That's pretty disruptive to businesses and to the quotes that they've got out on the street. And so that's definitely a challenge, that consistency piece.
Right. So that's interesting. Actually, consistency has now come up not only in certifications, but actually just, predictability on the financial models. I'm sure price of electricity and is also, a consistency question as that changes over the years as well. So moving on to a second question here, again, from your unique perspectives, trying to ask kind of a slightly different question here. What do you see as the greatest need for workforce development? Maybe in a more broad sense, not just from your organization, but based on your perspective and experiences. What do you see in the broader sense of how we can better develop a workforce and train a workforce? And Bridget, we're actually going to come right back to you and start with you.
Again, my primary job is really driving demand and creating market conditions under which contractors will thrive and their businesses will thrive. So, I guess from my vantage point, it's just having well-funded programs in place so that those market conditions can continue.
Great. Thank you for that, Bridget. Audrey?
I would say, taking it to the very highest level, we need to make the trades cool. If we want to build up this next generation of skilled workers that are going to meet these growing, the growing demand that we have for the energy efficiency workforce, we have to make them interested in the trades. It needs a seat at the table. It's not just a 4-year university or college pathway for every student, and we need to present that as a really viable option. And I say that's highest level because I think it needs to trickle down from the top, and all of the messaging needs to be, you go into preschool classrooms, you see these kids, they want to do all this stuff with their hands, and we lose that as we get older. And I think, it's really important to just make the trades an accessible, viable, successful option for folks.
Great, thank you for that, Audrey. And Paul, how about from your perspective? What do you see as the greatest need right now?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what Audrey just said. Our K through 12 schools have done a great job with preparing people to go on to higher education, to college. We haven't really prepared anybody to do work. I think, like 9 or 15% or something like that of the number of people who are actually kids who would actually consider going into the trades. There's a stigmatism. It's not as strong as it used to be, but there's a stigmatism where to look down on blue collar workers, working with your hands, that's, for the people who aren't smart enough to go to school. But yeah, it's making people aware that there are great opportunities in all of the trades. I think I just read recently that only it's 9% of the people in the skilled trades are actually in the 20 to 24-year-old range, and we're about to lose 55% of our workforce across all the trades. So we need, and I mentioned this when we spoke a couple of weeks ago. And Germany started this 12 or 15 years ago. They saw this coming, and somebody just told me that in Germany, 60% of the high school graduates are going into some type of trade, whether it's culinary, automotive, carpentry, and we need to get there, and we need to get there fairly soon, because we can pass all the legislation that we want, and electrify this country and get all the high efficiency equipment that we have out there. But at the end of the day, somebody has to show up in the truck to put it in. And it's just going to be tough with what we have now.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's impressive stats coming from Germany, and a really important part of obviously workforce development is not just training the new folks or supporting the folks who are in, but preparing for large shifts in the workforce, like retirement and aging out of the workforce generally. So my last question here for this roundtable part before I pass it off to Rafi for the Q&A, besides funding, because I think we could always use more funding. What would each of you like to see from decision makers? So from state regulators, utility regulators, policy makers, what role can they play going forward to support workforce development? And Paul, we're actually going to come back to you and start with you.
Yeah, a consistent level playing field for the people who want to get into this trade. As I mentioned, in Massachusetts, we can only pursue one license at a time. And if I'm a kid, comes out of high school and gets into the trade, I'm probably going to be in my 30s by the time I can get all the licenses. We also have, and it varies by state, but there's also a ratio of apprentice to journeyman. In some states it's one apprentice per journeyman, and some it's 1 for 3. But I think in Massachusetts, and don't hold me to this because I'm going by memory here, which is not so good, but I think if you want to hire somebody, you need to have 3 journeymen for every apprentice. So and I was just speaking to a contractor recently, they want to hire more people, but they can't because of that ratio limits them, and it's not a realistic ratio. So I think having something consistent that works nationwide, and where I am here, I know a lot of contractors that work in 3 states. So they're maintaining all those licenses for 3 different states. And it's just a lot of hoops to have to jump through. I'd like to see that just cleaned up and made a lot easier.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. Bridget, we're going to come back to you. What do you see as the biggest role for decision makers?
Yeah, I same as my answer earlier, making sure that these efficiency programs are well funded, that there is accountability in the funds provided to administrators, that the lion's share of that funding go toward incentives, and then a smaller amount toward the administrative cost in delivering those services, so that really most of the budget is spent on the efficiency measures and doing the work in the individual states.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bridget. That's such an interesting, not quite necessarily that more funding, just making sure the allocations of that funding is going to the right place. Yeah. And Audrey.
I would echo what Bridget said as well, and also my previous statements around just messaging around the trades and connecting workers to the workforce and their role in it, and that it's an important they have an important impact on the future of our environmental health and our economic health, and just reinforcing the idea that that trades are valuable pathways for young adults to pursue, and supporting not only the funding of these kind of programs, but the wraparound service providers, those organizations that help get folks to job sites and show up on time, get them access to computers if it's an online training. Those provide childcare services or connection to childcare services if that's a barrier for workers. And just, again, meeting workers where they are as much as possible to support their success as they pursue these pathways.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Audrey. And thank you to all 3 of you for sharing your thoughts on those specific questions. I'm now going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Rafi, who's going to moderate our Q&A portion of today's webinar.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our 3 panelists. We've seen a number of questions roll in already through the Q&A tab, so that's wonderful to hear. As we continue, please feel free to add additional questions, and we'll do our best to get to everything today. To start off our Q&A section, I want to ask a question that came in was submitted by somebody when they registered. And so to kind of get things started, can you talk about how long it might take before we have an adequately trained workforce to meet demand for new technology? We've talked a little bit about the need for newer workers, retraining of existing workers, on new technologies. But can the three of you talk a little bit about what you're seeing as about timelines and how long it might take before there's a workforce that will adequately meet the demand for heat pumps? And I guess if I'm asking this of all of you, I'll go down the line. We'll start things off with Audrey.
I feel like I want to defer to Paul on this one, but I mean, I would say we're looking at 1 to 5 years, maybe a year or two for upskilling existing folks. But if we're, talking about brand new to industry folks, it's probably going to be closer to 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but if nothing changes, we're never going to have an adequate workforce to meet the demand, to the points I stated earlier. But we're going to look at this 2 different ways. The existing workforce, the people who are already in the trade, that education is going to be continuing. It's going to be ongoing for the rest of their careers because there are changes coming out. One change coming at the end of next year is new refrigerants, and that's going to require training. And there are always going to be training changes that require training. As far as entry-level students, it's if we can get somebody the basics in school, however long that school takes, and they can get in to work with a good company that's willing to train them and take them on board, then they should be on their own to some level. So I would say within a few months, 6 months, but it's still going to be ongoing learning. And that's aside from, it can be longer. And that's aside from, again, going back to the state requirements, you're required to have a certain number of hours in your apprenticeship, and that varies by state. And sometimes education can take place of those required hours. But those apprenticeship programs, they can be 3, 4, 5 years long at times. So those are the things you have to consider.
And I just want to share an anecdote from Maine and just driving home my point around, market conditions. So the rebates that we typically saw annually through the Efficiency Maine program, rebating heat pumps, were about $10,000 a year. And then COVID hit. And we were sort of bracing ourselves like, oh, geez, what's going to happen? Well, we doubled those rebates. So the state of Maine, without any, intentional workforce development, just the market conditions as such, people were home, maybe had some disposable income, needed their homes to be comfortable because now they're working from them, drove those heat pump installs. So like an additional 10,000 heat pump installs that year. So we went from 10,000 to 20,000 unexpectedly. And it's pretty powerful what can happen when those phones ring off the hook.
Yeah, thank you all. That's the impact of COVID probably cannot be understated on just about everything, to be honest. And moving on, because we've got questions rolling in. I want to switch topics a little bit because we've had a couple of questions and comments that come in along this vein. But again, kind of out to the three of you, what could another organization, be it a utility, a private org, another nonprofit, some other entity who's interested in getting involved in workforce development or training, what could they do to maybe partner with you in the work that you do? or partner with other organizations that are kind of active in this space. And since Bridget, you were the last speaker, we'll kind of go back, start with you first.
You know, I mean, other program administrators delivering energy efficiency programs out there. We've got all of our resources on our website, all of our, you know, templates and everything. It's all right there. It's public. Take it, copy it, use it. Yeah, we've got calculators that help the homeowner really understand their savings and you know, point them in which directions that are going to save the most energy for them. So I would say, you know, use our website if that's helpful.
Thank you. Paul, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's really a tough one. You know, I have a sense that we don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily. We don't have to start from scratch. You know, I mentioned this, I think, to Andrew a couple of weeks ago. Since 11 years, I've been with Mitsubishi, and from the very beginning of this one organization talking to me, and then another one in another state, and I've had multiple conversations from different people, different organizations in different states about this, and we just need to get people to centralize this and get all together and put it all together. There are organizations out there in all the trades that have already looked into this and have been trying to work on this. We need to get those organizations that represent the contractors and get some incentives out there for these contractors to hire entry-level students and do like a type of co-op program where they can go to school for a week and then get out and get their hands on actual equipment and doing the job. I don't know what all those organizations are. I know in the HVAC world, there's Air Conditioning Contractors of America. There's ACA out there that's been involved with this already for years, but I think we just need to grab these national organizations and try to get everybody on the same page.
Thank you. And Audrey, I know that you already partner with a number of organizations. So if anybody else is interested in getting involved, how would they reach out to you?
So for us, you know, ICAST provides the online training, but you know, we rely on partners to provide the hands-on training. And what we found for a lot from our contractors is they kind of want to train folks themselves in how they do it. They want them to know how they're going to need to do it as part of their team. So you know, for example, we have a contractor in Denver who has a big enough team now that he wants to kind of formalize his hands-on training and run workshops that align with our online training, which is really nice. And, you know, again, I think just I agree with Paul, and just getting everybody on the same page and understanding that this is a bridge, this is a path, we shouldn't all just be operating in silos, because we'll have, you know, much more robust and effective outcome if we can all, you know, pool our resources together towards this shared outcome that we want.
Thank you. Thank you all. And moving on from that, I think we've got a kind of a related question from the chat, and that's kind of more in line with how integrated are your trainings right now? The question is, how do heat pump trainings differ across technology? So for example, would an ICAST training teach you how to install a Mitsubishi heat pump and vice versa, or not?
Not alone. So that's why, you know, it's important that's where the hands-on and on-the-job training part really, you know, aligns with what we're doing online. So we'll teach the basics and the high-level basics of installation, design, and service maintenance, but it's going to really come down to the on-the-job training, whether it's an upskiller who's already in the field, or a new to industry who's getting hired on by somebody who's going to train them up, that they'll get that individualized, customized training when they're in the field.
Moving on, we're going to kind of switch topics again and talk about something that we haven't really explicitly talked about yet, and that The question from the chat is, what are some equity metrics that are taken into account in your program? So do any of your programs specifically focus on equity? And I would personally define that as kind of reaching out to lower income or Black, Brown, Indigenous communities or other historically marginalized communities. Are you making a specific effort to reach out to those people, get them involved in your program, get them trained, get them into the industry? Is that something you're doing explicitly or not? And I'll kind of open this one. If anybody has something they want to talk about, go ahead. Or we can go down the line. But I don't want to put any of you on the spot if you're not doing something along these lines.
I would say, yeah, that's, oh, sorry, Bridget. Oh.
No, I was just going to say that's not a metric we're looking at. Certainly our rebate structure, incentivizing low and moderate income higher than anyone else, we do that. But on the contractor side, these are independent contractors and we don't necessarily rank them with those factors. So I just blurted that out to basically say I have nothing to share.
I think, primary initiative for ICAST in general is diversifying the workforce. So that's the primary approach is reaching out to partner with organizations who are serving underrepresented communities and populations. One particular example in Denver, I made a great connection with an organization called Remerge that is providing everything from housing and career training pathways to individuals who've been justice impacted and are maybe re-entering the workforce and society for the first time in many years. And so, we are always, thinking about how we can make this curriculum and programming accessible to folks from typically underrepresented populations.
Thank you. And Paul, I wanted to kind of just elaborate on this. I know that your training is specific to Mitsubishi products, and you mentioned earlier that you've got more interest than you know what to deal with. So I was just wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit more about where's that coming from? How are people finding your your trainings and reaching out to you? How does that process just work? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, we don't sell directly to the consumer. We have distributors who sell to contractors, dealers, and they're the ones that go out there and sell the product to the end users. And, so that's already, those relationships are already established. And as the products change, they get more efficient. We get new products coming down the line. They're sending their contractors to training. And some of these contractors could be brand new technicians, less than a year experience. And some of them have been in the trade for, 25, 30 years, even longer. So it's really, those relationships are already established. So we really don't have to go out and market this as much. It's to our existing customers. And sometimes contractors say, you know what, I've been doing this other brand for so long, let me try Mitsubishi. And they got to learn how we do things and how we like things done and so on.
Thank you. And Bridget, I know you said at the top that you have nothing to add in this space, but I was wondering if you could actually, talk a little bit about how your rebates are targeted at lower income households in Maine. Is there something you're kind of doing along those lines?
Yeah, so on staff, I'm a program manager, but my focus is low and moderate income. And so what that means to Efficiency Maine is that you would be eligible for an enhanced rebate if you're low income. So we use categorical eligibility. If anyone in the household receives heating assistance or we call it Maine Care. It's the Medicaid, health insurance, and a couple of other categories that are administered through the Department of Health and Human Services. So if anyone in the household is on sort of those benefit assistance lists, we've got a relationship with those agencies and we can verify that they indeed, are beneficiaries of those lists. And so they would be receiving a letter from Efficiency Maine that they are eligible for this low income enhancement, and they can share that letter with their contractor. And so everyone is well aware of what the rebate level is. And typically that's 80% of the project cost, whether that's an insulation job or a heat pump job. If you're low income, Efficiency Maine will rebate you 80% up to a cap of $8,000. So on a $10,000 job, essentially, Efficiency Maine will pay $8,000 if you're low income. And then our moderate income pathway is really just leaning on your adjusted gross income of a single filer or a joint filer. And that it would be a pathway for moderate income, which is a little bit more enhanced than our any income. But, we've got rebates for millionaires as well, as long as you're doing an efficiency project at home or at work. We've got rebates.
Great, thank you. And we are coming up at the top of the hour. It is 2:57. Bridget, I believe you have to leave at 3 p.m., unfortunately. But we do have up to an additional half an hour to kind of keep going through the Q&A. If our other two panelists, I believe you're able to stay until 3:30. And for any of you online, you're also welcome and invited to stay. We've got questions rolling into the chat, which is great. And we will do our best to get through as many of them as possible in the next 32 minutes. But as we kind of wrap things up, I want to say thank you specifically to Bridget to taking the time to speak with us today. It was really interesting. The work you're doing up in Maine, I think is really pertinent and helpful for those communities who are looking for that support. So with that, we'll say goodbye.
Sorry to drop off. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, panelists.
So thank you, Bridget. And let's just keep this rolling along. As I said, we've got a lot of questions kind of queued up in the chat. So the next one, we're kind of coming back to more kind of general tips. This will be for both of our remaining panelists, Paul and Audrey. What are some best practices that should be taught in a kind of foundational training program? Are there, the question asked, are there maybe 5 must-have topics, things that you think would be essential to training? And I would kind of add to that, things that might be applicable across states, across certifications, across different training programs. Are there really foundational skills you would be looking to teach new students into this space? Paul, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's the basics. It's the refrigeration, thermodynamic side of the refrigeration. What happens to refrigerant inside a circuit on a normally working system? Electrical principles, the flow of electricity, basic electricity, basic refrigeration, best practices for piping, for installation. We do a podcast, and I've listened to a bunch of other podcasts, and this is just, it's one of those things that a lot of people are missing the boat. Somebody said, I think it was Audrey mentioned, that some contractors just want a warm body, and we're seeing that not just in the HVAC trade, but in other trades, throughout the country. Sometimes they'll just send a person there who shouldn't be there. They don't have that basic understanding. Something that I think we should start doing in school again is just getting a shop class back in there. They seem to have taken that out of schools. Soft skills, it's tough. Anybody with a teenager knows it's tough to get them to make eye contact with you when you're talking to them. But I think I'm gonna stop there. It's basic refrigeration, basic electricity, best practices, and piping principles, and soft skills. I'm just gonna throw it there.
Audrey, go ahead, please.
I 100% agree with everything that Paul said. I will say the way that ICAST curriculum is designed is across 3 courses. So we have installation, design, and service maintenance. And we have a lot of upskillers who just want they just want to take design. They've already been installing heat pumps, or they feel comfortable with it. They just really want to know how to design a system, from the outset. So, but it's definitely the need for those introductory skills as well for new to industry folks, and even for some upskillers. But that's one of the things, because we were able to provide customized training pathways for folks, we can integrate some intro HVAC courses for new to industry. There's actually an HVAC assessment tool that folks can start off with, so they can see where they are in their handle on HVAC knowledge, and exactly where they need to start. Maybe they do need some more basic HVAC courses before they jump right into the heat pump courses. And if they're brand new to the green construction world altogether, and they were interested in getting their building science principles certification, we can also support them with that as well.
Thank you. And kind of related to that, we have another question out of the chat. In each of your opinions, would we be more successful trying to change or modify existing HVAC licenses in states to incorporate heat pumps, or would we be better off by creating a new heat pump license?
The heat pumps automatically fall under refrigeration, because a heat pump system is an air conditioning system that just runs backwards in the wintertime. An air conditioning system is a refrigeration system. So I don't think, in my opinion, there's no need to redefine anything. It is a refrigeration system.
Thank you for that clarification. Next question out of the chat, well, is actually a bit more of a technical question for you, Paul. So the question reads, for these very large DOE grant programs, can the hardware be spec'd for a relatively simple installation, i.e. monoblock heat pumps with many critical high pressure connections will be done in the factory, leaving low pressure water lines to be done by the new installer and their trainers?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not familiar with the DOE grant programs that he's talking about. It almost sounds like he's talking about geothermal heat pumps. I say he or she. Okay, so he, but yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but generally speaking, an installation, it used to be that every installation, actually, you know what, it still is. There's certain things you have to keep in mind with installation. It's the proper installation of the indoor unit, the outdoor unit, the proper piping, the proper wiring. All of that's important no matter who the manufacturer is. And we do offer that training. We do also are going to be piloting at a hands-on class, as I mentioned, with the IRA. With the passing of that, we have some training in the ready to go, just waiting for the states to tell us what the requirements are. And again, I think we talked about that during the challenges, but I'm not sure if I answered the question, but it's the best I can do, I think, at this time without understanding more.
Well, thank you for doing your best to answer that. The next question is a little bit more straightforward, and again, for both of you, we talked a bit earlier about the challenges that you guys see and that you're facing in your work. But to kind of flip that, could you describe some programs that are positive examples, great examples of some of the needs that you've identified? Are there programs out there that are meeting these challenges, programs that you are looking to draw from? What are other organizations or things out there that are already addressing the challenges that we've ID'd earlier today? And I'll hand it off to Audrey first.
Sure. Just some off the top of my head. Denver's Workforce Innovation Office has an employer subsidy program that will reimburse employers up to $6,000 per employee to take on new hires, which can also, it's not just, it doesn't just have to be applied to wages. It can also go towards transportation and childcare costs. So again, looking to remove those barriers for for folks getting trained and being successful on the job site. We partner with a lot of workforce development organizations that focus on their focus on serving youth and young adults. Groundwork Denver is one. Groundwork is their Groundwork USA is their parent organization. We work very closely with the Denver chapter. Youth Challenge Academies, if anyone's familiar with them, they've been developed through the National Guard. So they are very highly structured workforce development programs for opportunity youth. And we've worked with them over the last couple of years. Youth Build, Mile High Youth Corps, again is another one in Denver that we work closely with. So there's a lot out there, but I think the employer subsidy program, if that's one that other cities can replicate, is huge win, because it kind of takes the pressure off. I mean, the goal is permanent employment, but it takes the pressure off because it's at will for both the employer and the employee. So it provides a kind of try before you buy it sort of approach. And I think that it's been a very successful one. We've had a lot of referrals into that program.
Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot to add. I don't have the exposure to those organizations that Audrey had. I will say I've dealt with the vocational schools, public vocational high schools, who have what they call co-op programs. So once a student is a junior or a senior and their grades are okay, there'll be 1 week in school, and instead of going to shop, they go to work for an employer. And I've seen that have some good success as well in different states, actually.
Thank you both. The next question from the chat is do either of you have suggestions for developing a hands-on HVAC or heat pump training programs where no existing facility exists? So we're looking at building something from the ground up. Paul, I see you're laughing. Is that how easy is that to do?
Oh, I might have misunderstood your question. I thought the question was, how do you do it without a building?
Well, maybe you need a building to have something to heat with your heat pump.
This is probably going to depend on the state. Every state again has requirements for training as well. Training programs have to be approved by a lot of states in order to count towards the apprenticeship hours. You know, there's certain training that they require. So you really got to know what state you live in and what the requirements are. For us, for Mitsubishi Electric Trane, we have standards for our distributors for their training centers that they have to train the contractor force in their areas. But again, that needs no state approval. It's not part of any apprenticeship program. So that's a little bit different. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, thank you. Audrey, do you have any experience? You've built a program from the ground up, but it's virtual. Are any of the organizations you've worked with, building hands-on stuff from the ground up?
Well, I would say, I mean, some of our employer partners are contractors who, on a much smaller scale, they want to work with teams of, or they're planning to work with teams of, 10, maybe 50, but maybe pooling resources, and one contractor runs the training, but other contractors, can be invited. So we're still kind of in the really early stages of helping some folks build out those hands-on opportunities.
Thank you both. The next question is kind of coming back more towards the need for new workers into the energy blue collar space, but coming at it from a more of a different age gap. We spoke a lot about the needs to reach out to high school students, younger people, get them involved from the start. This question is what about older people who are interested in getting into the trades for the first time? Are the programs that you work with welcoming to older workers considering joining the trades? What are your experience more generally, let's say, with older workers who are looking to make a career shift? Kind kind of hand that off to, well, either of you want to answer that right now?
Yeah, before I came to work for Mitsubishi, I was working for a private post-secondary trade school. And there were, at the time, there were government programs, and I don't remember what the initial stands for, but I know it was TAA. And these were older individuals whose jobs may have gone overseas, you know, and they lost their jobs. So they had this grant money to get retrained. And you know, we need people in this trade. And just from my personal opinion, it doesn't matter to me how old they are. It doesn't matter to me what gender they are. I see more and more women in this trade, which is great, because we're not going to fill the demand for the workforce with just half the population. So we kind of need everybody.
Thank you. Audrey, do you have anything to add?
No, again, I agree with that. You know, some of our first signups, registrants for our curriculum came from the solar world. They wanted to get into heat pumps. So, you know, they were mid-career and had worked in solar for, you know, maybe close to a decade, and decided that they wanted to be part you know, of this new technology, this evolving technology. So, you know, I think, again, we can meet folks wherever they are. If they're wanting to join the workforce, we're here to support them.
So kind of moving on from that, I think as kind of a related question, what are some best practices that state policymakers can use, you know, in this space to encourage participation? The question says, you know, for example, should states condition incentive money around participation in apprenticeship programs, you know, for example, or are there other approaches that, you know, you would be looking to policymakers and regulators to kind of help encourage, you know, participation in training programs? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the answer, but I will say this, and I know hopefully nobody takes this the wrong way, but whatever the state policymakers do, it's got to be fair, and it's got to affect all contractors in the state, regardless of whether they're affiliated with a union or not. And that's the thing. We can't pick organized labor or not organized labor. Whatever the policymakers say, it's got to benefit all contractors, regardless of where they are and who they are.
Thank you. And Audrey, do you have any best practices in mind, or things that you would say to a policymaker or regulator?
I mean, I think that the incentivizing the trades, incentivizing people to pursue careers in the trades is a big one, is a big thing that can be done.
Thank you. So moving on to the next question from the chat. We've mentioned that there are some states that don't require licensing requirements for HVAC contractors. Would it be helpful for those states to mandate licensing that includes training on heat pump installation?
Yeah, I think licensing it's not a bad thing. You know, make sure that people, you know, are trained properly. That in most licenses you have to take a test for, you know, a little bit. So you need schooling to get in there. You know, we need a license for everything else. We need a license to, you know, to drive. I even had to get a license to get married. But it's not a bad thing. And the training requirements. Here's the thing that I in the back of my mind, I'm kind of worried about. If these states that don't currently have licenses do get licenses and they require training, is each state going to do something different? Again, I wouldn't want to add to the inconsistency. But just to circle back to how we opened the webinar, is we need consistency across the country. I'd like to see, you know, a national license similar to like the national building code, electrical codes, plumbing codes, and have the states sign on to those, and hopefully quicker than they sign on to these codes.
Yeah. Audrey, do you have anything to add on this, or can we move to the next? We can move on to the next question topic. I think I'll pass to both of you, and it's regarding organization that we haven't really touched on yet today, and that's organized labor and unions. What role did either of you, both of you, think that unions and collective bargaining agreements among contractors? We'll just kind of make this simple as possible. What is the role for unions and organized labor when it comes to workforce training on new technologies, et cetera? What role do they play? Paul, go ahead.
Oh, they play a vital role. I've had a relationship with the United Association, which is the pipe fitters and steam fitters, and sometimes the plumbers union, nationally for the last 9 or 10 years. I visited just 2 weeks ago one of their offices. We had a meeting around this topic. They do a great job, and to my comment earlier when I said that whatever the policymakers and lawmakers decide to do, it has to benefit both organized labor and non-organized labor equally, because organized labor can't hire everybody that we need, right? And I mentioned that in this meeting with the union, and they actually agreed with me and said, I don't know if there's anything specific in the IRA regarding organized labor. I don't know that, but they play an important role, but so do all the other contractors that are out there that are not part of the union.
Audrey, does your work touch upon organized labor in any capacity?
No, I mean, some of the contractors that serve as our employer partners are unionized, but we don't really get into that whole ball of wax.
Fair enough. The next question is a little bit more general, and again, for both of you, and that is, are there any research and analysis gaps that you see that would help further your work, or is there any areas where you would like to see, I guess, more research and analysis that would help with developing training programs or support anything along those lines? And we'll start with Audrey. I know this is a very general question, but is there anything more that you'd like to see in the research analysis space?
I'm very interested to run some analysis on our program after the grant period ends on the benefit program. I would say, this is tangential to this, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for sort of living laboratories where work is being done, that if there were ways to record that or even have site visits, field trips to those kind of projects that are going on, I think would be really beneficial, so that people can see what the actual work that's being done. This is something we talk about, as we're partnering on kind of the hands-on in tandem with the online curriculum. Is what if someone goes through all of the online training before they ever get to be on a job site, and then they realize, I don't want to be in a crawl space for half of the day or all of the day. So getting those ride-alongs early, so people can actually experience what the day-to-day of an HVAC tech looks like, is, for new to industry folks, I think is important.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of research out there with workforce development, and the skilled trades and the importance of getting it out there. So I don't know what else could be done, but and I don't have the exact facts either, that we need, but I keep hearing that Germany has done a great job. So and in an effort to not reinvent the wheel, I'd like to know more about how successful they are, and if they are successful, like I've been hearing, then what do they do and how do they get there? And I have no problem with copying what they're doing if it's working.
No, there's definitely, I think, a lot we could learn from other countries and the approaches that they're taking. The next question is, well, it's actually something that we haven't really we touched on yet. We've talked a lot about the need for credentials and certifications. Obviously, both of your programs kind of point students towards getting certified. The question is how important is a credential or a certification as the result of training? So if somebody is, let's say, not certified, it doesn't have a formal training, how are they able, to what extent are they able to, you know, work in this space? Are they limited in some capacity?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to my analogy with the automobile. You know, a car built in the 50s, if you had any mechanical ability whatsoever, you could probably figure out how it worked. But now, without that basic education, without those basic skills and the fundamentals, you don't stand a chance. And even now you need specialized equipment in a lot of cases. So when I started in this trade, there were two types of people that were getting into the trade. You either had the formal schooling or you didn't. If somebody didn't have the formal schooling, they'd be a little bit behind, but they could still do it. But now I don't see how you can get into this trade without those basics. That's a necessity, and it's got to be a requirement.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And you know, our program provides EPA 608, the training course and certification. And we also have been working with with BPI, Building Performance Institute, on they're creating a certificate of knowledge for heat pumps. So that's something that we're going to offer. You know, what I found is, in my experience, you know, there's the required certifications, and then there's like digital badging and additional things that are great on a resume. And there's people that care about those, and there's people that don't. So it's kind of, you know, some people like to collect, you know, those certs and badges, but if they're not required by the industry, you know, other folks aren't going to care as much. I will say that there are, with our courses, folks can get 3 up to 12 continuing education units from BPI with completion of our heat pump courses for folks who are collecting those.
Thank you. And Audrey, I'll just bounce this right back to you because it was a quick follow-up specific to ICAST. Is your training accessible to people with no experience in HVAC who are looking for an entry point into the field?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And we can help set up a customized training pathway for those individuals. So yeah, absolutely. Their pathway will look a little bit different from folks who are upskilling, but yeah, it's open to all levels of experience.
Great. We've got time, I think, for just a couple more questions. We'll see if we can get through everything. This next one is more on the quality of the job for a heat pump worker. Could both of you kind of speak to a little bit about what it's like to work as a heat pump technician? I think, is this considered a good job? The question asks, you know, do they pay well enough? Are they stable? Are they improving? You know, for somebody who has, let's say, no experience, or if you're looking to make a pitch to, you know, a high school student or somebody who's considering entering this field, what is it actually like being, you know, a worker on the ground?
Yeah. So heat pump worker is just part of the general HVAC industry. Again, heat pump technology has changed a lot in the last several years, decades, you know, especially recently. It's a lot more efficient than it used to be. It's not a new, heat pumps themselves are not a new technology, but some of the components of those heat pumps are fairly new, which gives us the efficiencies, which is why we're here. But it's, you know, there are some exceptions that, you know, if Bridget was still here, she would know there's a company in Maine. It's one of our contractors, and they're in Maine, which gets cold in the winter. And this company just does Mitsubishi heat pumps. They don't do anything else. They don't do gas. They don't do oil. They just do heat pumps. But that's more of the exception. Generally, Companies will be doing heat pumps, air conditioning, they'll be doing gas or oil furnace, a little bit of everything. Commercial, there are companies that just do commercial, companies that do just residential, some do both, some do industrial chillers and so on. But anyway, try not to make this so long. Our industry has also changed. Again, when I started in this industry, it was very common for somebody to be a 1099 worker, an independent contractor. They got paid, they had to pay their own benefits, their own health care. And that's changed because the contractors are trying to compete with other contractors to hire people. So there are some good benefits. It's good jobs. And just like, again, to give another analogy, in the medical industry, you go to medical school and you can select different fields to specialize in. The HVAC industry is just like that. There are many different fields. There are some people in the HVAC industry that do controls, and they're sitting at a computer and they're playing with some software. One of my colleagues has actually written a book. He's gone to the different trade schools in the area about opportunities in HVAC. A small little book. He's trying to get the word out there. So it's not your father's HVAC industry anymore. It's changed a lot. And a couple of weeks ago, I was in a meeting with some community college folks, and one of the doctors who ran one of the schools was telling me that her students are graduating and making more than her, and she's got a PhD. So there's good money to be made out there, and there's many different parts of this industry.
Yeah, Audrey, what's your pitch to somebody who's looking to get involved? Why should I switch careers, become a heat pump installer?
I mean, starting salary can be $50,000 with no degree. It's I don't have the Department of Labor statistic in front of me, but it's the fastest growing industry, HVAC, and in the trades. So it's definitely, it's definitely an investment in your career if you want to start in this industry.
Thank you. And thank you both. I'm taking a look at the time, and we are at 3:28 p.m. Eastern time. So we're coming to the end of our Q&A time. As we wrap up, I just want to, I don't know if I could summarize an hour and a half long conversation in a couple seconds, but I was hearing a lot of common themes coming out from the two of you and from Bridget as well. The need for consistent requirements and incentives and resources, just consistency across states, across organizations, identifying that as a really strong need, moving forward. And just again and again and again, we're hearing, the need for, new workers, new people into the trades, reskilling, upskilling existing people, just the need for being proactive around training, getting out ahead of emerging technologies, and just making this and more just incentivizing this industry or trades and skilled work as the kind of career that somebody would want to actively pursue. I think we said making it sexy again. Was that a term, or I'm making that up? Maybe that's my takeaway. But I wanna thank you both for an hour and a half of really interesting conversation. I think our viewers have found this to be really helpful too, and we've had questions rolling in. I still think there may be one or two we haven't had a chance to get to yet. So I think this is a topic that is really of interest to regulators, to policymakers, to other nonprofits, to anybody who's working in the energy space, working towards a decarbonized future for America. Recognize that we need skilled workers everywhere who are trained, who have good, consistent jobs, who have the support that they need, from regulators, from utilities, from contractors, to make all of this work happen. And I want to thank both of you and Bridget for, again, coming today, and for the work that you are doing in your organizations thank you very much on behalf of Andrew and myself and our colleagues here at the Regulatory Assistance Project. I had a great time today. I hope that everybody who's watching did as well. And with that, if you have any final words, we're a minute over, but any parting thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I will tell you how I finished a meeting a few weeks ago, and I don't want to say where it was held, but it involved some people from a senator's office, and they were discussing this very thing. And what I said to them at the end is, let's not let this die on the vine. Let's get something done. Speak to your lawmakers in your state on the federal level, and let's get something done, because we can talk about this all we want. But until the people with the power make the right changes, nothing's going to change. And thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I know I probably won't be invited back, but that's okay.
I just want to say thank you. It was great to be part of this. It was great to meet Paul and Bridget as well, and Andrew and Rafi. You're doing some amazing work, so thanks for including us.
Yeah, no, thank you all again. And yes, Paul, you're definitely on the ban list now. So with that, again, thank you to everybody else for joining. And I'll say just this concludes this webinar, but hopefully not, the interest in the work of this topic